So welcome. Today we are glad to have you here to talk about sort of and reflect on Indiana, right? So we want to have a conversation with you guys as community leaders who've been involved in the Indiana effort to promote more educational options for a long time. And so we thought it'd be really fun to sort of reflect on that and have just an open, honest dialogue where we can go back and forth about certain issues, and not just about Indiana, but also the future. And so I'll intersperse a bunch of sort of back and forth, I hope, and you guys can interrupt me anytime you want. Some of the questions I have, let's just start it this way, rapid fire, right? If you're looking at the future of education in America, one word, what is it?
Future of education in America.
Yep, one word.
One word. Scary.
Scary.
Consistent.
Consistent.
Well, where do I fit? And that's quite a spectrum.
I know, scary, consistent.
Uneven.
Uneven. Okay. Okay, so, we've been working on educational choice together, you and I, since way back in the day when BAO was there, Black Alliance for Educational Options, right? Why did you get engaged in this whole issue way back then when a lot of folks in your community didn't really want to be involved in this issue? Why did you get involved?
Wow, you want me to reflect back 20-something years ago?
Yeah.
I think the main thing was for me actually was because of our relationship and understanding that there was not necessarily in my I'm just a couple months away from turning 60, so I could recall back when Unigov in Indianapolis presented itself back in 1976 or so, when they took and redid the boundaries and started to separate and started busing here in Indianapolis, and I was part of the first busing. So it actually took me from a local school out of my neighborhood that we used to walk to and sent us all the way across town. And the experience was somewhat traumatic, I guess, at that time, being in the 6th grade and taken out of your neighborhood, being sent all the way across town to a place that you've never even, existed, even though it was a public school. But once into the school, we found that no matter which school we were in, the curriculum was all the same. We were told what was in the history books, and we were to believe what was in the history books. And then as I continued to get older anyway, the history books did not, tell the true story of American history as it relates to education and the disconnect between cultures as it relates to education. So, so now, we fast forward, right? Why did I do that then? Because if someone had to take a charge and did not know, I was kind of like a teardrop in the ocean at the time, not necessarily knowing exactly what the outcome was going to be or how I was going to gravitate to anything in particular, but just knowing that someone had to do something and to fight the powers to be at the time because it was so new. But understanding, we all make choices every day. We change our hair, we change our clothes. We've heard that conversation before, and yet still today that still rings out. Why is it such a challenge when we can, readily make any type of changes with anything else in our paradigm, except for when it comes to, what is going to be the right thing when we start talking about our children and the education and the curriculum that they get. So for me, that's why, I kind of launched out there for curriculum change, if I had to sum it up.
So you said this great phrase, you said a teardrop in the ocean back in the day, right? But that's not what it is anymore, right? In Indiana, with all the work that we've all done and you've been part of, there are so many more options out there, so many more of it. What has been in your mind as the teardrop, has it been not just one teardrop, now it's multiple teardrops, it's lots of people out there, right? What's been the real life impact in your mind, in your community, from all the choice that's out there?
That's a good question. With all the options available, there still has to be resonate with, households and the parents in the households, that they understand what's available. And typically there's a smoke screen, or they treat the conversations like taboo when you start talking about what's best for kids. So there is still, one size don't fit all. We know that as leaders and stuff now, but then there's still that cohort of individuals that still believe that things still, while they know that they're changing before our very eyes, don't want to accept the fact that it's changing before our very eyes, which leads individuals to still stay in their own silos and not want to have the difficult conversations that ultimately will, yield some disconnect with folks. Friendships has been lost around having conversations around education choice. Families have broken up because of the conversations around this. So, I'm hopeful now that those that have gravitated towards it are starting to get a sense that, because of the results that are being yielded from this endeavor. I mean, it's like bad credit. Don't happen overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. So this thing here, it's a long process. Unfortunately, it's just a long process.
All right, so pop quiz. One word for the biggest challenge facing American education right now.
I think, from my perspective, it would be how schools are increasingly becoming more segregated by economics and by ethnicity.
Okay,
I
so-
think that is leading to much larger problems of division and inequities in our communities.
Okay. Betsy, AC,
I'm trying to think of one word.
one word.
Oh, is that a one word?
Well,
Was it
he-
one
you-
word?
You
Or
really didn't
sentence?
do
One
one word,
sentence.
but you went.
That
You
was-
got to one word, which was segregation.
Oh, I thought
right?
it was
So
one
segregated,
paragraph.
right? So
I think
No,
it's a
that word.
paragraph.
no, one word.
Biggest challenge facing education in America today. It's 3 words.
Go on, 3. Okay, we'll give you 3.
Lack of acceptance.
Lack of acceptance. Okay, I get that. Okay, I got red
One
lining here.
phrase.
One phrase. One phrase.
One phrase, one letter, one word. So what's the question?
Biggest challenge K-12
That's what
education.
I know,
See,
that's- I know.
to me, it's really simple. To me, the biggest challenge is redlining. This concept that you are basically born into the school district they have to assign you to. Now, that's choice is being able to get us out of that.
We don't have that here anymore.
Oh yeah, well we do. We still have people assigned to their school districts.
Yeah,
right?
but
So
you
getting
have
rid
the
of school-
ability to go anywhere.
If the school district accepts you, right? And many of them do, but they don't all, right? And so this idea of being a house price still helping determine what your education might be seems to be troubling to me, right? Which is part of the choice. So, so Betsy, actually, this is a good segue to you. So, you think back sort of like 10.
So you don't want to hear my word?
yes,
Is that
I
what
do.
you
Yeah,
said?
I'd be
You
happy
just
to.
gonna
I think
jump
you
over
just-
me?
All right, I didn't mean to
Just
step
didn't
over
want me,
you.
but-
You go on, say your word.
Oh, I'm still thinking of one, but I got one for you, I believe.
Okay.
Because of the changes, so I'm going to, here's a good word, incremental.
Okay.
And I use that because, it's changing, but the changings that are happening, incrementally happening, are not dramatic enough. And because they're small changes that we're adapting to, we need to do something more granular, I guess, than these micro changes. Need to be more on a macro level, I guess.
I like that macro change. Well, so starting with macro change, Andrew, the Oaks Academy was here, started long before school choice in many ways, right? You started as a school before there was any sort of school choice educational options in Indiana, and yet your school has embraced school choice and become one of the premier schools in the state.
Okay, start again. Now.
Your hands are too big.
It was cutting into Betsy's shot. It's okay. When you're talking, be free to use your hand, but when you're not,
Okay.
So put under the table.
you're fine.
No, you're fine. AC's some big old hands right here. Though.
All right, start that one again.
Are my hands too big too?
No, you're not talking yet.
Okay. So the Oaks Academy started before there was school choice in Indiana or educational options in Indiana, and yet the Oaks Academy has embraced educational reform and educational options and become a preeminent sort of private school. In fact, one of the biggest acceptors of scholarships and one of the most successful schools. Why did you guys decide to embrace choice? You didn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a fair question. We didn't have to. But embracing choice was sort of a matter of conviction for us. If we were going to continue to advance our families to serve more, advance our mission to serve more families, it needed to be through the path of choice, of whether it's choice scholarships, scholarship granting methods. We wanted to give more families choice, whereby they could see the Oaks as an option for them. I would say so many of our families, the vast majority of our families would view themselves as public school families. In fact, I would put myself in that category. I grew up going to public school. When we moved to Indianapolis, we assumed our children would go to a public school. And so the vast majority of our families view themselves in that same light. And to allow them to think about their children's education differently, I think it just required something something that would sort of allow for a mindset shift. And so when you put money on the table, or when you provide really good options, minds start to shift, but it takes a long time. And so for us, it seemed like not just an option, something that we could opt for, but it seemed like a necessary move for us to continue serving current families and more families, which is as it.
So you've been doing it for 10 years now, right? At least since the scholarship program
Yeah,
started.
yeah.
What's been the impact on your school culture, and the sort of communities around your school?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask us. In fact, just yesterday I was having a conversation with a prospective family who were very anxious about the Oaks, not only accepting public money, that this just brings up anxiety for them about government interference. I mean, we value our independence as an independent school. And so we have lots of families who say, you know, if you participate in a program such that public money is coming into your school, is it going to force you to abandon your mission? Is it going to force you to move away from being a faith-based school? Is it going to force you to adopt a particular curriculum? Thankfully, in this state, none of that has happened. And I would credit our leadership with ensuring that. In fact, when the voucher law was first passed as a school, we decided not to participate in the voucher program because we were really concerned about that. We were concerned about, because I think the voucher law passed like in June, July-ish, 10 years ago, and we said, whoa, let's wait for the regs to be written. We're not going to jump in before we know what the requirements are. So we actually held back for a year. And then I remember going in to meet with the governor, with my board chair, and he said, what are you thinking? Get in now, you know, don't wait. And so I'm often asked now, so how has the Oaks changed as a result of participating in the voucher program or the choice scholarship program? And it is not the changes that anyone expects or expected 10 years ago. So we haven't had to change our curriculum. We haven't had to change our mission. We're not told who to hire. The change has been we've grown from 330 students to now 1,000 students. And that's a dramatic change. But that's a change for the good. For the good of the Oaks, for the good of this community. And it has allowed us to do so many more things and serve so many more families. And so for us, where there has been a change, it has been altogether good change.
Has there been bad?
Question. So the location of the Oaks,
Yeah.
your schools, Why did you target the areas to operate the schools? Was it based on cultural demographics or because of a need assessment?
Yeah, the latter more. It was so a couple things. Where there did not seem to be good options in '97 when the school was launched, where there was a vacant school,
Okay.
which so at 23rd and Park, there was a vacant, beautiful historic building right across the street from Greater Morning Star in what is now obviously a completely different neighborhood. But then it was largely a vacant neighborhood, with a vacant school anchoring a vacant neighborhood. And so that combined with the founders, not entirely, but largely being associated with a church that was just several blocks north, Tabernacle Pres. And some of the ministries that Tab had started, including Tabernacle, including Raphael Health Clinic, thinking, okay, how can we have the most positive impact in this community?
So some people are saying that's great, but there's been a lot of people chased out of that community that used to live in that community, right? So Betsy, like you're 10 years ago, you're in the room with Governor Daniels as he's doing all this. You're leading this effort as the Deputy Chief of Staff, and making sure the choice happens. What do you think, if we're talking about this? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What things could be done differently going forward? As we look at this, because AC will tell me all the time that, hey, we got to be careful that choice doesn't displace communities, right? And how do we make sure that we don't displace communities? So I'd be interested to hear sort of your view of like 10 years ago, like what did we get right and what do we need to work on?
Well, I think we got right. AC mentioned before incremental change versus big steps. And I think one of the things we got right is when we went in big. And it's taken us 10 years to do something else that wasn't incremental, right? To do something else that's big. And so I think that's one of the things that maybe we got right. We probably got a lot of things wrong. And I think the markets kind of helped adjust on that over time. We made little changes over time. You were talking about displacement out of the neighborhood, but then you've also, the neighborhood's probably changed, but you bought a school in a vacant neighborhood, and now today I would argue your school is sort of the hub of that neighborhood.
Yeah,
and an anchor there.
Yeah, and I would say, if I would check kind of my description, I would retract vacant from my description, because there were neighbors, there was a neighborhood life, but there's nothing more detrimental to a healthy neighborhood than a vacant school, than an abandoned school.
It's like one of the saddest things to drive by.
Yeah, of course, and so that happened in '98, and then happened again. And AC, your daughter was a part of this, of the launch of the Oaks Brook side, a second campus in a neighborhood that also struggled then 9 years ago and continues to struggle. So I think some initiatives that are supported by these kind of this work and choice, I think sometimes get a bad rap that they're looking to cream skim. They're looking to cream skim students, teachers, but also momentum in a neighborhood, or create momentum in a neighborhood that leads to gentrification or displacement. And I know that does happen sometimes. I would say the school that I'm involved in is looking for opportunities to serve more underserved families and serve communities where there are not decent options. And I think the sort of the funding that has been associated with choice has allowed us to do that and continue to grow.
I don't know what y'all think, but to me, one of the things we got wrong and we continue to get wrong is messaging around it, right? Communicating around it, getting buy-in from community leaders, having it be still an us versus them conversation, us versus them dollars, and us versus, right? Like all of it. 10 years later, I don't think we're a darn bit better than we were 10 years ago on it. I really don't.
I agree to that. It's like we have a tendency to use the term at risk, right? I hate that word with a passion. So several years ago, I started talking and having conversation about youth of promise versus youth using at risk, right? So we're all robotic in our ways daily. And so unless we have kind of reprogramming our own actions and the way we communicate with folk, basically by listening, we can change that conversation, even like the word charter, you know, because in the black community, that's the first thing. It starts to go political then. And then we start talking about the advantages or disadvantages versus, you know, public versus charter, when we all know here that charters are public schools, but it's the language, and it's not a language barrier. It's just a matter of who is delivering the message. And unfortunately, you know, those that have the ability to speak truth to power in our community, their kids are going to warm, fluffy schools. I'm thankful to God that I'm able to do the things that I have with my family, but that's just my family. I wish that I could see an end to this coming, but I don't. When we start talking about, you know, the language or the character of the words that we choose to descriptionize what it is that we are all vying for, you know, viability, right?
Yeah, so I don't think it's, one of the things I think is really frustrating is it's public versus private, or private versus charter, or public versus, and the answer is, and that's one of the reasons I love EdFit, because the motto of EdFit is get in where you fit in, right? This concept that it doesn't matter where you go, it's that you choose to go, and this whole concept of a world of educational options. And so, you know, even in Indiana, we're sort of like, it's private schools, and our private schools have been great, but not really reacted innovatively, right, in many ways. And so I guess let's just ask this question, right? Tomorrow you could snap your fingers and design the education system of tomorrow. What would it be? What would it look like? Sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. For me, real world learning. You know, we are so book driven, curricular driven, and, you know, now we're pre-COVID versus post-COVID. So the world ended a year ago, as far as I'm concerned, on March 11, 2020. So now how do we reboot ourselves to this new paradigm shift, right? And to me, it's all about, you know, the students. And, you know, I sat on the board for years at the McKinsey Career Center for a decade. And we ended up having to shut that whole program down because we could not get kids to come in and learn trades, anything that involved them being hands-on. Why is that? Because traditionally you got into those type of workforce because of someone in your family. You know, you work with your uncle. I did asphalt when I was 12 with my uncle. Still, I'm in construction today because of that. But now we're in a system right now. You know, education. I believe in education. I believe in education. But I want to know who built that bridge I'm going across too. So it's like, you know, where is the check and balance? So for me, it will be a real world learning kind of school where we can take, and, you know, how many kids are going to college, off to college now, get out, and I know a ton of folk don't even work in their degree space, right? But then now this is an opportunity where you can at least go test the waters right out of the high school. Well, I don't like this. Well, I don't like that. Now I'm gonna get a degree here in anthropology or whatever because I've had a job shadowing or something for that summer. So that will be my thing.
I love that idea. Love that idea. I mean, it's like this sense of you don't have to go to school in this traditional way to get educated.
You don't have to go immediately after high school.
Yeah.
You still got to be trained and nurtured in whatever profession you in. That's why most jobs have OJT, what you call on-the-job training, right? But then you come in with a degree, you're already mindset. You're not coachable to me at that point.
But maybe you don't even have to go to high school to do that kind of thing, in this traditional way. Maybe you can start doing that stuff in high school and say, we don't have to go to a building.
You can.
Nothing personal, Andrew, but you don't have to go to a building, right?
You can.
You just go off and try something different,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
How about you guys?
Repeat the question if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, you could snap your fingers tomorrow and create the education system. The sky's the limit. What would it look like?
Yeah. So I would say first is for teachers to be a more honored, more lucrative field.
Okay.
That we would draw the best and the brightest into teaching, particularly K-12 and even early ed. That the best and the brightest would see that as a very appealing, attractive career option. So that we're bringing in the best minds, the most creative minds, the most passionate people into our schools. To me, that's what I'm the most anxious about today.
Okay.
Is
So that just strikes me. I like that.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I'm Elon Musk, and I'm saying to you, God, that's thinking like you're still using the means of production to think about how you're doing this stuff, right? Right. Where's the sort of Elon Musk of the world coming from? Is it just going to be the same old trying to get teachers involved? And that's great. I'd love to pay them all the one, but what's different, right?
Mine would be different. I mean, mine'd be the Wild West, man. I like to shake it all up. Everybody could go anywhere they wanted. They have control of, their portion of tax dollars. You can personalize and individualize. If you want to do, real life learning, on the job training, get an internship, make a little bit of money, have it apply, prove that you've learned skills that we think are valuable. But, you got stacks of how to educate kids in law, this thick. I'd love to not have that, right? I'd love it to be, you know what? You know how to do it. Teachers know how to do it. They were trained how to do it. Parents know if their kids, parents know if their kid's getting a good education. If they're not, they're going to go elsewhere, right? And so just open the doors and stop telling people how to educate and just let them do it.
Well, even on the teacher
Probably
side,
be a
though,
disaster in the beginning, but I think people would figure it out.
Yeah.
just on the teacher side, though, teacher, you can teach a teacher to teach, but you can't teach a teacher to care, right? So on the teacher side, we talk about teachers, but then when we go into any education system, the majority of the teachers are women and my white brothers or my white sisters. So now we start talking about, me being culturally diverse in the school. What does that look like? So I'm like, it's being promoted wrong. I don't want to promote you being a teacher. I want to promote you being the administrator, something with more hierarchy to it, so that you can paint yourself, a more positive end instead of I'm going to be stuck in this classroom for the next 40 years. No, I don't. I'm bringing you in so that you can rotate into the classroom, rotate out of the classroom into a position that with a more authoritative power that allow you now to take your own idealistic mind and create the environment atmosphere that you want it to be.
Yeah, I have a vision. Let's not have schools. Let's have communities with education, right? This idea of a school building is just so archaic. It's so 1700s, right? Let's go back there. Right? It's so teacher in front of a classroom. How about? I said this in a previous thing. A kid gets online in the morning and says, "Well, I'm going to go to that school today. I'm going to go over to this place today. I'm going to go to the park and learn this today, and I'm going to create customize my own life." Right? This concept that we don't need buildings anymore. Right? Although we do, if people choose that, that's fine. There's no control over that. So if you think in Indiana, do we get there? So Milton Friedman said, "I sense we're on the verge of a breakthrough, which will sweep like wildfire throughout America." He said that in 1998. Right? I sense we're on the verge of a breakthrough. We'll sweep like wildfire through America. 25 years on almost, right? Are we any closer to that? Are we getting closer to that in America? Are we getting closer to options for all? Indiana is, obviously, through the work that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, but to your point, I don't know that there are a ton of innovative options, right? I mean, we have options, but a lot of them look very similar to the one next door.
That's right. So what do we do about that?
Get rid of all my
Get rid of all your
regulations.
regulations.
Make it a free-for-all.
But that means you have to trust people.
Because all the regulations make everybody look alike.
And that's bad. That means you have to trust people. I guess the question, do you trust people? Do we trust people and teachers? Do we really trust them?
I trust people. I don't trust systems.
That's right.
I'm not one into a bunch of name dropping, but a very hierarchy individual, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm, said something in a call back in March when COVID hit. and said that I'm not concerned about what happened before. I'm more concerned about your failures moving forward, because now we get to reinvent, right, what it is about education and our lives for that matter. So this person wanted us to fail, because what are we doing? We're rewriting history again now, because what we're doing now is taking all the information that's dated, putting a little bow on it and saying it's a new idea, when actuality is nothing new at all. So this is the time to blow it up.
Just
You
saying.
know,
What would happen? It'd be kind of fun. I worry that COVID, by the way, is going to be our excuse for the next generation for us to have not properly educated and prepared the next generation, right? That it's going to be a convenient excuse. Well, they were in second grade when there was COVID and they kind of lost a year, and that's fundamental reading. Or they were in 8th grade and they never learned math, or they were, right? And so it's going to be a convenient crutch to not deliver for kids like we need to prepare them to do the jobs and the work and engage with each other and their community like we all want them to.
right.
So I worry about that a little bit.
But and I absolutely worry about that. And our system is saying, well, these parents can't do that, right? I mean, do you actually believe that parents can actually figure out this stuff? I mean, the system always seems to blame parents, right?
I think they can, especially after this last year, where parents found out what they didn't know about their kids that they know now. You know, and it has, to me, blossomed households, because now you want to go. I would wager to say, aren't you getting more calls and more concerned type, just inquiring mind type? People just want to engage just a little more because of COVID, right? Because they done been home with their kids and they couldn't get out. I didn't know this was all going. I didn't know your homework was stacked up like this. I didn't know you had to. Now you got to help and assist with that, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that was a positive, I would think, for the education platform.
That's my biggest fear in all this sort of post-COVID stuff is just what's happening now. Oh, the solution has to be going back to school. I mean, now that Randy Weingarten has said we've got to go back to school, that's the solution. And everyone going back to the same old building thing is just not going to solve our problems, right? Again, there's nothing in your life that you do that looks like the way we deliver education. You don't shop like that. You don't go to Amazon like that. You don't go to doctors like that. You don't do any of that stuff. So can we break this cycle, right? And if can we do it without? Can we do it? Actually, my question is, can you do it without doing what Betsy says, which is basically let the Wild West happen, right? Let's see what happens. Can you actually change the system without doing that?
No,
No.
flat no.
No. Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about kind of radical change.
Like Bitcoin, like Amazon, like FedEx, like all those things.
Hard, so let's just make it a big one.
What?
Change is hard
yeah.
and not wildly accepted. So when you do it, let's make it big, make it valuable. Make
All
it
good
radical.
things come from the change that comes from the industriousness of humans.
So does COVID give you an opportunity, right? So one of the things I often hear, and you said that kids shouldn't have to go to school and blah, 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 but when you got a 2-parent household and everybody's working, or a single-parent household and they're working, and your kids got to go somewhere, right? And so is there an opportunity? Will you find a lot of people that can work from home? And then some of these ideas where you could have learning pods, or you could have experiential learning, or you could do some of these different things. Can that take off more because there is more flexibility also in the parent world? Because to your earlier question, yeah, I trust parents. I don't think there's a single parent out there, no matter how successful they are, that don't want better for their kids than they had.
Exactly. And that's that micro approach of, I think I first read about it in a school system out in Colorado. The kind of the coffee table type learning environment. And I bring that up because you struck a nerve, see, because I am over at the Edna Martin Christian Center.
Yeah.
And the kids were coming in there because of their parents had to go to work, so we did our, remote learning.
Yeah, creative learning.
There, and I move around. Some days 6 kids there, some days 40 kids there, and this has been going on for a while, right? So as I move around, and start talking and engaging, and see the energy that they have just being in a more subdued type environment versus the barking environment. So are teachers teaching our kids to listen or teaching them to learn? We keep talking about teachers. Yeah, they are valuable assets to what we do, but what's the methodology that they are using in their approach? And it's the same systems that I got years ago.
so like AC, I have to say, like my kids, went to a Catholic school, which shall remain nameless, and they would call me and say, "Oh, your son's had problems today." I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" "Well, he wasn't being quiet enough. He was getting out of line." I'm like, "Don't talk to me about that. That's compliance. I don't give a crap about that, right? I care if my child got educated today. Did he get educated today?"
Right.
And they said, "Well, he's doing fine." Great. Well, then don't bother me. That's your job, right? Or kick him out. I don't care, right? Because he could probably learn more on YouTube, right? Than he can learn at your school currently, right? And so this conversation about schooling being compliance versus school being creating liberty, self-actualization, this idea that education is supposed to be about self-actualization, is it really in the way we've organized it? I don't know. I don't know if it is. If there was one person, living or dead, that you would invite to this table, regardless of what industry or background they come from, who would it be? Come on.
I forget my guy's name in New York that I kind of growed fond of. Harlem,
Jeffrey
Canada. Jeffrey Canada. Even though his platform is such that it is, and that's the thing about people in hierarchy. When you start becoming, you get popular, and then you start to get caught up in your own smoke, as to say, because you become robotic again. Because you got X amount of time, you're supposed to speak for 7 minutes or whatever that duration is, and I got to get this certain spill in, and you make sure you get that content into the conversation. When you need to shift, right, based on that environment. So I don't think sitting at tables, this is perfect, because we're not dictating the outcomes of this conversation is random, right? So if I looked at people, I wouldn't call any name, but somebody able to do this on the fly, just shift gears. You hear something, forget about what you came here prepared to say, address that issue head on. And then now your audience and the people you're trying to message are going to be more intuitive, about what it is that you want to share. So.
I can't think of anybody good, right? Like I'm trying to think of different inventors, right? And for whatever reason, the Wright Brothers come to my head because I think that they looked at something differently, right? And all of a sudden, flying to get places is accepted, right? And opened up the entire world to people and everything else. But before their crazy idea and their crazy attempts of doing it, right? I'm sure people thought these guys have lost it over here. They're loony and everything else. And like now it's commonplace and, makes a entire world available to all of us or most of us. And so somebody with that mindset that's just willing to do something where the rest of us are looking at them going, they're nuts. And they're determined to make it happen. And then, 100 years later, that's going to be commonplace.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
when it seems impossible, we have to do the impossible.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody that's just willing to drive through it no matter how many people call me crazy.
So and this is a great Milton quote, so that the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable, right? So you have that kind of innovation. Andrew, you got someone you would say, hey.
It's interesting because the premise of the question is that we work best in relationships, in conversation and dialogue, right? I mean, that's the premise of this conversation right here. And so as much as we want to embrace kind of a radical notion of kind of individualized education, I think we rely upon one another. We rely upon one another to grow, to be stretched, to be challenged, to learn. And so I think those who we want to bring to the table are those who appreciate the value of the centrality of relationships in education. That aspect of learning is not just a discrete skill set that can be developed, but it's the very heartbeat of growth and learning, is being in a relationship and conversation with other people. And so who is that person who best gets that? I don't know. I don't know. It's probably someone, who's very inventive, but someone who understands kind of
Let's try that again.
Someone who's very
someone who
inventive.
understands the humane aspect of learning and of growing. I think so. The lesson of COVID for us as a school are manifold, but one of them was when we started planning for next year. We said, hey, why don't we keep this whole online option available to families? Because we thought our families would say, yeah, that's what we want. We need the flexibility. We need to eliminate the risk, because you never know with the variants. And so we offered it to all of our families, some 700 families, thinking that if we just reach a threshold of maybe 10% of those families, we're off to the races. We're going to do it. We had 11 kids sign up. And all those families were hedging. And we said, hey, would you be willing to come back? They said, yeah, we're ready to come back now. We don't want to be online. We want to be in community. We want to be in relationship with a teacher, with other families who are on the same journey with us. And so I think we lose something in our own life experiences when we extract education from our larger kind of lived experience. Who would it be that can advance that?
Should have been more of a team. What team would you put together?
Yeah,
than-
and maybe that
than
is a
person?
team. Sure, I think that's a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you guys for spending some time with us talking about this. So Indiana's poised to continue to grow, and you guys have been such great leaders in making that happen. So I really want to thank you for joining me for this conversation. Back and forth dialogue about how do we make things better and what's great about Indiana and how do we take it to the next level. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.